not following any specific, you know, religious doctrine or anything like that. I was pretty much an atheist as a teenager, and then it occurred to me that there's so much I don't know. I swing much more towards the Eastern way of thinking, I suppose. Like if there is a God, then I don't think they'd necessarily need me to believe in them to love me. I think that Jesus Christ was probably a prophetic person who had an incredible insight on the world. I don't know what that evidence would be. It would have to be something pretty compelling. Hesitations about Christianity, it's probably not about... I see it as it's just something which is interpreted by humans, kind of generosity and selflessness, which, like, if it happens under the name of Christianity to humankind, then I'm fine with that. But if it happens under another name, then I'm also fine with it. Well, I've never read the Bible, I don't think. Not as an adult, at least. So I'll read it.
Good place to start. I just had a great conversation with a young man who's tried to kind of grapple some of the spiritual aspects of his life following the lockdown, and really just was open to hearing me out, and has expressed willingness to even read a Bible at some point. So I'm really grateful for his openness, for his candidness. I really do pray that he does consider what the Bible has to say. We talked about different religions. We talked about he's kind of leaning more on the kind of Eastern mysticism side, but I just asked him, what sort of evidence he would need to kind of make up his mind, and we talked about the journey towards truth and what faith means in people's lives. I shared a little bit about my own journey, so I do pray continuously for him to have a read of the Bible, to see what many millions of people, myself included, have discovered over the years and millennia about a God who is loving us so much that he would be willing to die for us. That's a unique message of Christianity that I try to explain to him, and I hope that something that he continues to explore for himself. So again, great conversation, great time with this young man, and thank you for this time, and thank you for watching this video, and hope to see you in the next one. God bless. So I start with the same question to everyone. That is, do you have any belief? Do you have any faith? Do you have any kind of philosophy of life?
So I would say I believe in a higher power in some way, but I don't know. Probably not following any specific, religious doctrine or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Has that ever changed for you? Like maybe you were growing up, you had maybe more of a traditional upbringing. I don't know if you were exposed to like Church of England maybe, or something like that.
My parents were, I'd say, fairly agnostic. I'd say that they both my father came from a Catholic family, my mum came from a Methodist family, but they kind of didn't enforce anything on me. I grew up as a teenager, maybe not really thinking... I was pretty much an atheist as a teenager, and then it occurred to me that there's so much I don't know. When that was actually in lockdown, I was like, okay. It was not to say that atheists are necessarily arrogant, but I felt that my journey, my perspective of not believing there was a God was an arrogant perspective to hold. So
got it. And then something obviously kind of made you slightly more open, maybe to that possibility. But you would, maybe speak to me a lot about like when you imagine something supreme like that, do you believe that is like a personal being, or is it more of just an impersonal force, or something we cannot possibly know? How do you sort of imagine that?
I don't think it will have human characteristics, if that's kind of vaguely what you mean. I mean, I don't think it's a guy in the sky with a beard and stuff like that. Carry on. We'll ask more questions.
Like traditionally, right? Traditionally, people would, not naming any faiths, so to speak, but you kind of have the monotheistic faith. They would believe in a creator God, right? Who one of his characteristics would be that he creates, right? He created everything we see, everything we experience, we ourselves, and he is all powerful, all knowing. He knows our thoughts, he knows our inmost sort of spirit and our inmost being.
Yeah.
So that's one sort of idea, right? And then you have more the Eastern mysticism ideas, right? Buddhism, Hinduism.
Yeah.
Like Buddhism would say, look, it's the reaching nirvana is the goal, which is kind of letting go, not being attached to anything in particular, not even God as such, but just detaching. That's the goal, right? And so it's not necessarily a being, a person, so to speak, but more, I don't know, just a way of life, maybe more than anything, right? So is there like and there's probably a lot more that I haven't even covered, right? But those are kind of maybe the two most.
I swing much more towards the Eastern way of thinking, I suppose.
Yeah. And is that because kind of that's what you feel like has the most truth, or?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And have you tried to have you taken that beyond the just sort of your thoughts? Have you actually tried to sort of practice any of that, or?
I meditated quite a lot in like lockdown and stuff like that. Felt great. Felt like I was improving my life, and then kind of, it just didn't become a habit enough that I stuck with it. I do sometimes. I've kind of read into Buddhism a little bit, but not enough to say that I'm Buddhist, and I'm not interested particularly in labeling myself as anything anyway, because I don't know, if there is a higher power, I think he'd be, or not he, they would be intelligent enough to realise that just believing in them, like if there is a God, then I don't think they'd necessarily need me to believe in them to love me.
Okay. Taking that thought further a little bit, right? Because that is now, those are some of the very thoughts of let's say Christian belief, right? A belief that there was a God who actually created this world for a relationship, right? So the fact that we exist, we're not necessarily like an experiment. We are created out of his outpouring of his creative power, and then with the idea that we would know him, and that we would relate to him, and in such a way that we would ultimately give him the kind of glory that he deserves, because he is a wonderful being and he's worth having that kind of relationship with. Is that something that, like, that kind of personal being, right? Would that be too off-putting? You mentioned before, right? So like a person in the sky with a beard. I mean, that's not sort of saying that, but it is ascribing a personal characteristic to God, right? A God who has some of the same characteristics we know, right? We are familiar with human characteristics, but almost like putting it in reverse. It's not because he has those characteristics because we do. It's because it's more the other way around. He created us in his image, right? In his light. I don't know if you heard that story, right? But if he created us, that means that we are more like him, and so the way we act is because he is like that, right? What do you think about that thought?
The idea that we're created in his image.
Yeah.
That doesn't. It doesn't seem to me to be obviously true. No, that's not something that I kind of. I don't know. It's such a complex thing. It's hard to find the words for, isn't it? But I think that our capacity to understand the complexities of the idea of higher powers is pretty limited. So we want to we attach kind of human characteristics to the idea of a deity because we can't compute the enormity of it as an idea.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Now, and I appreciate that you said you're more sort of gravitating towards maybe the Eastern thought, but I guess my background being more on the Christian side, if I continue, maybe just a couple of questions just to help me understand your view of that sort of monotheistic side, right?
Yeah.
So the Christian claim that Jesus came to be one of us, right,
Right.
on this earth would be the way that Christians would approach, like, that challenge of yours, right, to sort of say, look, we could not comprehend him and perceive him, and to an extent that would be true. If we could, we would be God. But on the other hand, we can, because he dared to become one of us. So it's almost like, again, he came up from wherever he is, he stooped down to our level of ignominy or whatever it is, right? And so to experience the fullness of life that we have. So while we may not be able to know how it is for him, the claim would be that he knows how it is for us because he lived as one of us. So I guess my question is, that idea of Jesus Christ, who came down 2,000 years ago to live and become a historical person, recorded in the scriptures, in the Bible, what do you make of that?
Well, I think that Jesus Christ was probably, so full disclaimer, I don't think he was the Son of God, but I think that he was probably an incredibly prophetic person who had an incredible insight on the world, in the same way that someone like Muhammad or the Buddha, or I think that most of the belief systems actually have a lot in common, and that it's kind of cultural and kind of contextual, like, a lot of the kind of nuances which are different are mainly to do with, like, geographical and other differences like that.
Okay, so you would say kind of same core message, maybe just different culturally, emphasis different, and yet these religions have been separated for millennia in some cases, right? There must be something that they still hold, like it's I think usually what I hear when I speak to people is, like, people who don't ascribe to any religion, they say, oh, they sound all the same to me. But when I speak to a religious person, like a Muslim or Christian, they're saying, no, there's no way, right? We're completely different. Like, they say this thing, we say completely different things, right? So, and I tend to sort of trust the person who's within that, because there's a reason. There must be a reason, right? That why they believe that they're not believing what the other guy believes, right? So, how would you? Go, sorry, guys.
Those people, would you agree they usually, or at least, they usually have been brought up in that faith, and have been brought up with the mindset that they're different from other.
I would say there's a lot to be said about that, right? Often people would say, look, you are only a Christian because you were brought up as one, or you're Muslim because you're brought up in this culture and everyone is a Muslim there. And I think there is a lot to be said about that, but I think also then you look at some of their teachers, their scholars, and the reasons that they give you are much more deeper than that, right? So it goes beyond the culture, goes beyond the upbringing. But they'll point to their scriptures, right? Because that's ultimately, right, if you're going to be a religion, you have to have a founder of the religion, but you also have to have something that is going to be persistent, that is going to survive whoever the founder is, or whoever the group is that kind of founded this. Scriptures usually tend to be the thing that survive, that kind of describe the tenets of beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at the scriptures, then you can start seeing some of these differences, right, much more clearly.
Okay.
So I guess not everyone necessarily invests the time to do that, but that is where they start to jump out.
Have you out of interest? So you kind of said you were
Christian background, yeah.
And you still describe yourself as a Christian.
That's right. Yeah.
So have you read the Torah and the Quran and I've forgotten the name of the others, but
No, those are the main ones, right? And the Bhagavad Gita and some of the other, But I've read Quran, and like Torah is basically the Old Testament of the Bible, so you kind of say I've read that as well. And I've tried to do more than that. I've tried to actually listen to the scholars, tried to listen to the arguments against and the for. And these arguments are probably going to go ad infinitum, right? They're never going to be maybe fully settled. But I think, to me, going through that journey, going through that process was important for me to have peace within my own heart of what is it that I believe and why would I believe that I believe, right? So to escape exactly kind of the challenge that you brought up, which is, okay, yes, my mom and my dad, they were Catholic, let's say, and they brought me up in that value system, but is it mine, right? Is it truly my faith, or is there some other truth out there? And so my life was, especially my later parts of my life, was to try to answer that question, right? To sort of say, look, is there a truth? What is it? Can I find it? Can it be understood? Can it be known?
Yeah.
But ultimately, I came back through that journey to that starting position to the extent that I could now safely and confidently say, okay, now I can explain why is it that I believe, not just because I was told it, but I can explain it now on the basis of much more, so I would say, much more a rich set of arguments and evidences even. And my background being, I would say, I'm kind of a scientific kind of a mindset. That's what I studied in university. That also helped me to apply a set of tools and questions that would satisfy the logical part of my brain, not just my kind of heart and my spirit. But can I answer it with a set of arguments that actually come to a conclusion that I can kind of stand behind?
Well, I have friends who are kind of Christian who have, I think, been on the same journey where they kind of grew up with it, were kind of 95% there maybe, and then had a real wobble,
right?
And that was their moment to kind of interrogate it, and now they kind of seem to be, all in 100%. So I don't presume to think that I know better than you. I don't. It's not where I am on my journey necessarily.
And would you say that journey kind of continues at least if I would ask, look, we know what we know. We also know we don't know quite a lot. And even me, who claim to subscribe to a faith, I would say, look, if someone came to me with really solid arguments against Christianity, I would have to, I'd like to say that I would admit those, and then I would have to change my mind. If I really love the truth, right, and if I am honesty with myself, I would have to say that, right? But would you say that you are also kind of in that open state that, given sufficient set of arguments, whatever that is for you, you are willing to consider what comes before?
Yeah, absolutely, but I don't know. It would have to be. I don't know what that evidence would be. It would have to be something pretty compelling for me to kind of.
Yeah, and it's interesting. That's the next question I would usually ask person, like, what is that kind of thing? And I'm not sitting here offering it up. I'm just very curious. Have people who are not quite yet certain, or they have a different view, like what would be the kind of evidence that would sort of say, okay, if you gave me something like this, I'll have a think, I'll have a consideration.
To believe conclusively in a kind of God, or in a Christian.
I guess so, yeah. So usually the journey is usually, first you admit that there is a God, that there's a logical possibility for a God, and then the next
Yeah.
question is, okay, if that is true, what kind of God there is, and then you can get into different religions, like the Muslim claims, the Christian claim, the Jewish claim, the Hindu claims, and then you kind of go from deism being just the idea of a being, to a theism, the idea of not just a being, but a being that subscribes to a particular set of characteristics, dogmas, and faiths and teachings. That will put that being in a very specific set of claims, right? Much more specific than just being this amorphous kind of God. So it's like, I guess that would be the top down view. Like, so the evidence for God, what would the kind of evidence that would begin to, without talking about religion, but the God's existence?
So I said that I'd be open-minded to it, but now I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, what are other things that would convince me? Because I think I have I'm quite dismissive of ideas of, I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't be a kind of a one moment thing. Maybe it'd be a more kind of gradual thing, because I don't think there would be. I can't think of one thing which would happen which would change my mind. But if I didn't kind of start being open-minded to the idea of a higher power just like that. I kind of had it as a gradual thing. So maybe the progression to believing in something wholeheartedly would also be a gradual thing.
Fair. Yeah. And are you the kind of person that tends to resonate more with logic, or are you more of a heart-led person, right, where there would be experiences, so to speak?
That's a good question. The logic. So that's kind of what I was getting at, just very incoherently a second ago. But if I was to see something which seemed supernatural, let's say, I think if I was with a group of my friends or something, and they were all like, "Oh, what just happened?" I think I'd probably be the one who'd say, it could be explained this way, this. So that's the logic, I guess. But also, I would see the magic, maybe, for a lack of a better word, in that tree.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of that's the belief in something which I can't explain, I guess. More than if something we thought looked like a kind of ghost appeared behind that thing.
Right. So where I see maybe the two, for me personally, just to share, may not resonate with you at all, right? But where I saw some of that, right? Because I also had a kind of a sense of wonder, but then to try to bring it down maybe to the earth, right? My kind of scientific brain kind of took over. But the two things met when I started to meditate a little bit about creation, right? And the wonderment of the creation, the complexity of life, and specifically like the universe having a beginning, still expanding. What does it mean for things to have a beginning? Well, they have a cause. Something causes to go bang. The universe, didn't just go bang by itself. Something must have been behind that act. And then, from what I know of information and chemistry and other things don't necessarily always just spontaneously kind of self-assemble, especially not into complex forms such as life from non-life and all those kinds of things. Made me sort of say, wow, and as much as I love science, as much as I hope that science then catches up, I fully appreciate there's a that doesn't mean because we don't understand that we'll never understand, but there's something within this where philosophically it lets me to sort of think about, wow, well, rather than waiting for the science to kind of catch up in some sort of ultimate sort of future where all these answers are going to be clear, why don't I already consider some of the answers that are being presented for such questions? So that could it have been God that spawned this universe? Does any God claim to have done that? And if we looked at the universe, and if it was created by an intelligent being, what would be the characteristics of such a universe, right? So the order that we see, the laws, the natural laws that we see. I mean, those are the kind of things that also drove, some of the greats like Isaac Newton and some of the other sort of great naturalist sort of thinkers. Their faith drove them to discover those laws, because they said, look, if there was an intelligence behind, I should expect to see order. And they set out to discover what those laws were, and that order was, and they described it in equations and mathematics, but they ultimately did so because they expected it. Whereas someone who would be completely sort of atheistic or agnostic, they would say, well, there could be order, there may not be order. I'm not sure whether I should expect order one day and then chaos the other day, because I don't have anything to tell me otherwise, right? So to me, that was quite a lot of sort of that kind of logical sort of thinking, looking at the nature, observing it, thinking through it. I was like, to me, much more likely, much more probable is the explanation of a God than not, right? So I don't know if that sort of has helped or not, but like that was part of my journey, right? That caused me to sort of have these kinds of thoughts that led me more slowly but surely to sort of, okay, now if this is true, then the next step, what would that be like? And then does anyone say that? Okay, blah 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 blah. To the point that I opened up the Bible seriously, right? And I had to ask, okay, well, were these things that are recorded here, were they true? How could I know that they were true? Were they written with a sense to deceive? Were they changed over time? And then even those things were kind of answered adequately, very strongly, to let me to think, look, there's logical, there's philosophical, there's science arguments, and there's actually historical argument as well here that is pretty compelling. I can continue to deny it all day long. I can continue to pretend like it doesn't exist, but I cannot pretend like it's not there, like it doesn't have a strong explanatory power, right? But ultimate decision was mine, right? There's many people who come to that point in the journey and say, whatever, I'm gonna stay where I am. These are interesting things, but too fantastical for me to go beyond the step of faith, right? And to do it. Whereas for me was compelling enough that I said, look, these are actually things that I'm going to step onto in faith. And even though I don't understand all the answers, but I'm in faith, I'm hoping to discover more. And that helped me to reveal more things. That openness helped me to get to know more, but to also to get to a place of that relationship. The idea is about a relationship ultimately, not so much intellectual understanding and some sort of or even holiness. That's never the idea. That the beauty to me ultimately about having faith is to know that I'm in some sort of a relationship with one who created me, and that gives so much peace, right, and hope and joy. Even though the life is not any easier, that doesn't suddenly remove all the difficulties in life, but it actually gives certain foundations that other things can kind of step onto.
Yeah, I think I can identify with that sense of, once I started, being open-minded to spirituality, I definitely identify with that sense of peace. There's a kind of sort of sense of safety in it, I think. Maybe that's too kind of shallow a word, but like there's kind of, that I identify with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe one thing that we all want to have, and that we don't necessarily think of. When people ask people, what do you want out of life? People say, I want happiness, right? But I think maybe a more subtle, more valuable element is peace, right? Being at peace. No, I'm glad that you that's something that you recognize at least
Yeah,
as a
sure.
desire, as a value. Yeah.
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 And that peace is that thing which seems like, I don't know, happiness almost feels like it can kind of be explained by science in terms of like you have endorphins and whatever, whereas peace seems to be that slightly more mystical, again maybe wrong word, but like that thing which is hot, which we can't quite explain yet.
Yeah. Inexplicable to some
Yeah.
extent. Yeah, it almost has to be either it's a product of circumstances, but it's difficult to say what circumstances kind of result in that until you feel it, feel being at peace. I'm not taking too much of your time, but maybe just one or two more questions. Like you said, you have friends that have gone through a journey, have kind of committed their life to sort of being Christians as well. Have you had kind of these kinds of conversations maybe with them?
Not in this depth.
Right.
So, but I'll try and answer your questions.
No, I was just curious to sort of see if they have kind of explained. I think even though I explained kind of a bit of my journey, I think it can be different than for different people. I was just curious to know if they had something that you found maybe helpful or something, or is it just completely was? But if those conversations didn't come up,
No, I wouldn't be able to honestly answer about how they feel about it. Actually, I wouldn't. I don't know.
Okay.
I would have to ask them though.
Yeah,
this question's prompted that.
No, indeed, But I mean, I would just maybe just encourage you, right? If anything else, to I don't know, think about these things, process these.
Yeah.
I think it was helpful to me. I think that peace that we desire can only truth is very close to it. I think knowing something that we believe to be true encourages, I think, that peace. And I would just encourage you to seek to ask the questions.
Yeah.
However hard they are, don't worry about insulting people. I think knowing is better than not knowing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Did you have any sort of questions the other way? Maybe for me.
Not immediate ones that I can think of off the top of my head. And what's the name of your YouTube channel?
Christian Street Conversations.
Christian Street Conversations.
Okay. And but I talk to more of the non-Christians than Christians, because I think that's what I think we're living, maybe I would call it, in a post-Christian world, whereas we have some
kind of post-faith almost, or post-religion at least.
Even that, you're very, very, very good perception there. But whereas I think we have maybe some residual vestiges of Christian, like we still have some holidays that are Christian in nature and some institutions that are left over to us, but by and large the society has moved on. Yeah. The problem with that is that whereas religion, maybe for all of its faults, and there are many faults, by the way, I'm the first one to sort of admit the fault of the institutional religion, but people, having rejected that, have also kind of found themselves without any sort of anchors, morality-wise or spiritual-wise, which maybe they don't realize how important those things are.
I agree with that completely. I do think there's some kind of spiritual, some unifying thing which is absolutely required to sort out problems, climate and basically everyone. We live in a world where people are more self-involved and self-obsessed than they ever have been, and I think faith and the decline of, as you say, a post-Christian or post-faith world is definitely part of the explanation for that.
Yeah. Last question. If you were to summarize like the message of Christianity, the way you understand it to be, and I appreciate what you said previously about some's very similar. Some of the messages are very probably shared across religions, but I guess focusing on Christianity, like what would you say that it is?
Well, to not quite answer your question, if I had kind of hesitations about Christianity, it's probably not about. I see it as it's just something which is interpreted by humans. So it, in the same way that, like, if I wrote a set of rules down and gave it to 10 different groups of people in different places, and then gave them 1,000 years, 2,000 years to interpret it, then it would all get mangled and twisted in ways which are, like, not to do with the essence of what I put down. They would be kind of influenced by a huge amount of factors. But sorry, to answer your question as best I can, I think love thy neighbour seems like the first one, and, like, yeah, it's about a sense of community and caring about other people and kindness and kind of generosity and selflessness, which, like, if it happens under the name of Christianity to humankind, then I'm fine with that. But if it happens under another name, then I'm also fine with it. The kind of the Jesus being the Son of God and stuff doesn't do it for me. But, you know, if that kind of, you know, I haven't interrogated it enough to talk intelligently about it.
No worries, no, that's honest, yeah. And I think, you know, love thy neighbor, and I would say that usually people also give another one, which is not wrong at all, but I think just to mention it, so they say the golden rule, which is do unto others as you wish them to do unto you, is often the one that is which is found in the Bible and shared by many religions. But let me propose, like, the uniqueness of Christianity, just to see whether it's something you may have heard before.
Yeah.
Just get your sort of reaction. But yeah, it goes back to Jesus, not so much being the Son of God, although that's part of it and core component of it, but the fact that the reason he came down to the earth, like I said before, like the reason God stooped down, is because there was the problem was of the nature of humanity, the fact that we are sinful. And you can see that nature being played out in almost all aspects of life, right? From the fact that we do not tend to be nice to our neighbor, the fact that there are wars, the fact that the climate change is happening and we kind of care ourselves first, right? You know, in all aspects of society, of our relationships, things seem to be broken, things seem to be not right. And that's, you know, notwithstanding diseases, earthquakes, and other natural sort of things, but by and large, we cause ourselves those problems. And usually religions would step in and say, well, you just got to try better, or you have to follow maybe a set of rules, or you have to maybe pray harder, or you have to give something up, and you have to be more holier. But I think Jesus, what he came to do is actually quite unique in this respect, because he said, no, you cannot help yourself, guys. You have tried. The history is full. The Old Testament is full of cases where God's own people have tried and failed, and they've disappointed God many, many times over, because every time God helped them, they would just fail again and do terrible things to one another. This is because the sin is as such a root of our hearts that it's impossible to weed it out without sort of killing ourselves ultimately, right? It's the problem of sin goes so deep, it goes way into our heart. And so God said, look, I will provide a solution. If the punishment for sin is ultimately death, which he said it was, he said all the sin is so serious, it requires
yeah.
Yeah, so he said, look, if the sin is so serious that it requires the punishment of death, because ultimately you're rebelling against your creator, your God, all of you should die. Ultimately, a lot of you should not exist. But well, that would cease. That would, what would be the point of that? So instead, he sends his son to die on our behalf as a substitute, right? So the reason Jesus came, if you believe that he even came, but yeah, let's assume that he did exist. It wasn't so much to become a teacher, to do sort of wonderful words or deeds, or to show love or anything like that. It's actually quite more profound, and that is to die. Ultimately, his mission was to come with a point of death on the cross, and that death is the thing that pays for the sins that we all deserve. Okay. The punishment that we all deserve is taken up by him, by God himself. So he provides the sacrifice, he provides the solution, knowing that we cannot help ourselves. And that is the tremendous...
He died for our sins, right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where that comes from, right? So dying for our sins is not died because of our sins, no, but he died in our place. And so those who believe in him, right, they can claim that sacrifice is ultimately theirs. Mm-hmm. And in return, he gives them his perfect nature, because he never sinned. So it's a great substitution that happens. He gives to the person that believes his perfect nature. He takes on our sinful nature on himself. And it's not to say we never sin anymore. In this earth, we will continue to sin, but hopefully, the presence of his nature, of his Holy Spirit in us, drives us to loving action, to action that honors him. No longer what we used to be. We're now new creation, new people. But it buys us peace and hope about the future. It buys us ultimately eternal life, right? Because we are now guaranteed to be in his presence. The relationship is restored, and that restoration was ultimately what the goal was of his death, right? And so if you look at the religions of the world, none of certainly not the major ones, have a loving God who's willing to die for his creation, not just his creation, but creation who has rebelled against him, for his enemies, right? And that's the very definition of love. Like in Paul's words, Saint Paul, right, in the Bible, he said, he tries to define love, and he says love is actually you die for your enemy. Mm-hmm. That is love. It's much even greater than dying for your friend. Everyone would die for their friends, presumably, but who would die for their enemies? God did. God did. He sent his son, his only son, to die for us so that we may have a restored relationship with him, right? That shows us something about his character, shows us about something what he's like. And yes, we have added onto that the institution, the other things on top of that, but if you read the Bible, and that's what comes out very, very strongly. That's what he is like. That's what his character is, and that's what sort of captures people's minds, their souls, their hearts. And that's what being a believer means to follow that kind of God, to be like Christ, to follow him. And yes, loving your neighbor, but you asked after, why am I loving my neighbor? Well, I love my neighbor because Christ first of all loved me. He showed me what love is like. Even if my neighbor were to annoy me and become my enemy, how do I love him? How do I still love him? That's the perennial question, because someone loved me like that, and now I know what that love kind of looks like, right? To me that's what blew my mind, ultimately.
Well, I've never read the Bible, I don't think, not as an adult at least. So I'll read it.
Good place to start. They start from Bible can be quite scary one to start with, right? Where do you start from the beginning, or where do you start from? I would, if someone who's kind of looking to get back into it, just start from the New Testament, one of the Gospels. Gospel of John is a very good one, simple language, very profound ideas there, and that would be well recommended.
Gospel of John.
Gospel of John. Start with that.
And, Okay, great.
Anyway, so the fact that you're open to it and I'm glad to hear that, right? That you have that openness. I mean, that's part of the journey that I think we talked about before. So, no, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a really interesting conversation. This is not what I was expecting this afternoon. That's been really good. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate. Thank you for your time as well and your patience. And
My pleasure.
Yeah, sorry if I took too much of your time.
No. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah.